A lot has happened since we did the last episode last Saturday. Today is Saturday, September 25th, and I was going to get back to the regular schedule that I had planned out for Nothing But the Truth, but the interesting developments in the Gabby Petito case are too compelling, so we're going to get right to it right after the announcer lady does her thing. Here we go.
Welcome to Nothing But the Truth, the podcast about investigations and how you can become a better detective. This is the no BS, no Hollywood nonsense real deal. Now here's your host, Detective Rom.
Somebody called this a made-for-TV drama, and it kind of really is, and that's the first thing I want to talk about is just to talk about media coverage and what it means and some of the comments that have been made on social media. I'm Ramesh Nyberg, your host of Nothing But the Truth, the podcast that makes investigations better by helping you become a better investigator. The first issue I want to cover is a lot of discussion that I've seen in the news and on social media. It's kind of funny, the news media kind of covers itself when they talk about why Gabby Petito's case gets so much attention and there are other missing person cases. And the comments that I've seen focus on women of color and indigenous women that are missing, and why aren't things being done on those cases. I just want to give you an insight. Let me give you my insight from my perspective, my 27 years in law enforcement. I don't think that those cases get less attention from the investigative side. I can tell you that when an investigator is assigned a case like that, there's plenty of fuel and motivation going on to close that case. It may sound trite, it may sound corny, but we really did work for the victims. We worked to resolve cases because it meant something to us. We were usually the ones who were in the living room with the victim's family, whether it's a missing person case or a homicide, holding their hand and listening to their grief and their sorrow and their frustration. And so it meant a lot to us to close a case like that. And I think the investigators on the Gabby Petito case are no different. I think the investigators on all these cases that people are talking about that quote-unquote nothing is happening are no different. Now, what makes the Gabby Petito case different is the news media. It's the news media coverage that has made this such a sensation and has made the videos and everything about it going viral on the news and in social media. I mean, why? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Gabby Petito is this pretty blonde, kind of Barbie doll kind of looking girl that has captured the attention of everybody. And then you have the added dimension of Brian Laundrie, who is arguably the only suspect in this case and was the only suspect from day one. So it's somewhat of a murder mystery, and it was covered just like that in the news media. That's why this case is getting so much attention. And it's not the only one that's gotten this kind of attention. We've seen this in the Scott Peterson case, which happened, I don't even know, 15 years ago or so. I can't even remember when that happened. And he was a suspect in the murder of his wife and was eventually charged and convicted in that case. So this is how it plays out. The news media jumps on these things, sensationalizes it, and it becomes a sensation. That is how it's designed by the news media, let's face it. Unfortunately, the other cases that people are talking about do not get the attention, and they don't get the attention of the news media. I would sit and debate with anyone that they don't get the attention of the investigators. I can guarantee you they do. So let's move on to the actual developments in this case. The largest development, of course, is that since I last spoke to you, Gabby Petito's body was found in the Grand Teton National Park area in Wyoming. And I should also make a small correction. In last week's episode, this information was brand new. The case had just pretty much exploded in the media, and there was misinformation that the couple may have been in Yosemite National Park. And I did mention that in the podcast because there was a tweet or some sort of text or communication between her and her mother from Yosemite. That was quickly found out that that was not true. They were not in that area. And even the mother came out and said that she did not believe that text was from Gabby. Now we know that they never made it to Yosemite, that all the things that had occurred looked like they occurred in the Grand Teton National Park area, which is where her body was found. So that's a huge development. A couple days later, the autopsy results were published, but they weren't completely published. So this is also an important aspect that's still pending in this investigation. They did determine that it was a homicide. How did they determine that? Well, I wasn't in the autopsy room. I've been in hundreds of autopsy rooms, and I guarantee you that they found some sort of trauma that was clearly not self-inflicted or inflicted by accident or by some animal or other means. And this was not an easy thing for them to determine, because if you look at the timeline, and timelines are extremely important in cases like this, we know that she was probably killed between August 28th and September 1st. Well before September 1st, at least 35 hours before September 1st, because that's how long it takes to drive from Grand Teton National Park to Northport, Florida, where Brian Laundrie arrived on September 1st. So there's about a 2-day window there where it looks like he killed her or someone killed her, and I think we can safely say it was him at this point. The investigators don't have the probable cause to get an arrest warrant yet for that. There's an arrest warrant out for Laundrie for something else. But to continue with the discussion of the autopsy, they were able to determine it was a homicide, but they have not determined the cause of death. So there's two things that a medical examiner or coroner can tell you. They will tell you what the manner of death is, and they'll tell you the cause of death. The manner of death is either going to be homicide, suicide, accidental, or natural. Those are the only 4 categories that make up the list of manner of death. Cause of death is a more specific medical phrase that is going to be something like gunshot wound to the chest or multiple stab wounds to the neck or whatever it might be. Determining the cause of death is problematic in this case because of the decomposition. You can figure that Gabby Petito's body, if she was killed between the 28th and the 30th of August, was out there a good 19 days. Her body was found on the 19th. In that type of environment, a wilderness environment, decomposition is going to be fairly advanced depending on the temperature, and you're also going to have animal activity. And that just creates more problems that the medical examiner has to be able to identify in the autopsy to distinguish animal activity and decomposition from the actual trauma that they apparently did find. And we don't know what that trauma is. They're keeping that under wraps, and probably a good idea, because that's going to be crucial in helping build the probable cause case against Brian Laundrie that investigators are trying to compile. Now, talking about the search for Brian Laundrie, this is interesting because investigators have been looking for him in the area of Northport, Florida. There's a large wilderness area called the Carlton Reserve. And apparently the Laundrie family mentioned to the police that Brian said he was going to go there. Was that a red herring, or did he do that to try and throw investigators off? Maybe. But the thing I find really interesting is they called off the search about a week ago, and then they resumed it. And when they resumed it, they went back with police divers. So apparently the Carlton Reserve has a lot of swampy areas with ponds and lakes and so on. And I found it curious that they would apply so much manpower and resources to searching underwater. Because when you're searching underwater, you're usually looking for a drowning victim, and usually that would be a situation where someone just disappeared under the water just after an hour or so. If they believe that Brian Laundrie drowned in the Carlton Reserve, his body's going to float back up. Bodies sink after they drown, and then decomposition sets in, and the body gets bloated and it floats back up. My personal theory on this is that they're looking for some piece of evidence. Remember that they served a search warrant on the Laundrie home. They took several items out of the Laundrie home recently. They also towed a vehicle from there. After they did that search is when they went back to the Carlton Reserve with the divers. So this tells me that they're looking for evidence and not necessarily looking for Brian Laundrie. Although certainly it makes sense to continue looking for him with drones and dogs and manpower. I just feel that the divers kind of brings a new dimension into the search, and I think they're looking for some form of evidence that he may have discarded there. I could be wrong. I'm wrong once every couple of years, so maybe this is it. Anyway, The other thing that's interesting is a neighbor of the Laundrie family in Northport. They saw the Laundrie family pack up a camper and head out for a weekend trip several days after Brian returned home. This is interesting in that nobody has seen Brian since that time. Did they hide him? Did they give him money, send him off? Did he take a plane somewhere? All possibilities. The other possibility that people have talked about is Brian may have gone somewhere and taken his own life. And we discussed this in the last episode. And I think there's some merit to that theory because he left his wallet and his cell phone at home. Now, of course, that could mean that he's trying to change his identity or use an alternate identity and blend in somewhere else, maybe in another country. All possibilities that investigators, I'm sure, are considering. I mentioned before that the timeline suggests that her death occurred between August 28th and the 30th. And the reason I said the 28th is that another development, another new piece of information that came to light is that Gabby and Brian were seen at a Mexican restaurant in Wyoming on the 28th having lunch. There was another couple there that saw them fighting. And apparently several people, I'm sure, saw them fighting. And at some point, they saw Gabby crying. They saw Brian Laundrie having some sort of dispute or argument with the staff at the restaurant. And apparently it was a rather ugly domestic type scene. The couple that saw them later was watching the news about the case and recognized them from the photos they saw on TV. So that's what establishes that she was alive on the 28th. And again, I said that he had to drive 35 hours to get home by September 1st. So that really kind of narrows our timeline down somewhat. Finally, we're talking about the warrant that was just issued. That was another big development. A federal warrant was issued in one of the district courts in Wyoming. Brian Laundrie was using Gabby Petito's credit cards to buy items and get cash out. What those items were, we don't know. I'm sure the investigators know. And that's obviously something that they're keeping close to the vest, as they should. And I think we may see additional information popping up, as I mentioned before in the first podcast about this case, where they're going to be looking at all of Brian Laundrie's credit cards, his purchases, his gas purchases, which of course he had to make on the way back, and probably we'll see some video of him showing up at a gas station. And that's the type of stuff that investigators will, in a case like this, take a trip to the gas station. If they see that he was pumping gas and maybe walked into the convenience store or Quick Mart that a lot of these gas stations have, and they'll go talk to people. They'll go interview the clerk, try and identify maybe other people that were there and see if he spoke to anyone, if he did anything, if he was throwing anything away. These are all leads that are viable leads that might help at least fill out the timeline or possibly uncover evidence against him. So as I tell my students, and I teach high school criminal justice classes, probable cause is what the investigators are trying to develop. What probable cause is, for those of you who are uninitiated in criminal justice terminology, it's a very important standard, a legal standard that has to be met for a search, for example, to get a search warrant or get an arrest warrant. And what probable cause is, it's defined as a set of facts or circumstances, or I should say a set of facts and circumstances, that would lead a reasonable person to believe that the person committed a crime. And of course, this crime has to be delineated in a probable cause affidavit in order to get a warrant. They have to have some viable facts, statements from witnesses, evidence, circumstances, and this all has to be expressed in a probable cause affidavit that is taken to a judge. And the judge has to sign it if he agrees that the probable cause exists. All right, so the police don't decide if probable cause exists. The police hope it does, and it's a judge that has to certify that and confirm it by signing the warrant. The warrant is then active, it's put in the system, and an arrest warrant is issued. I thought it was kind of funny when the FBI talked about the search warrant on the Laundrie home. They said, we have obtained a court-authorized search warrant. Well, guess what, folks? That's the only way you can get a search warrant is through the courts. So every search warrant is a court-authorized search warrant. That pretty much covers the developments that have happened over the last week. Who knows? There could be things happening right now as I speak, and we might have more to talk about in the next episode. I'm going to try and get back to the Wednesday schedule this Wednesday. There was just too much going on, And I'm kind of glad that I waited an extra couple of days and did a Saturday episode so that we could include some of the updates in this case. Where's Brian Laundrie? That's anybody's guess. Keep an eye out. I have a feeling he's probably grown his beard maybe a little bigger, or maybe he shaved it completely. Wearing sunglasses, maybe, a cap. He's not a unique looking guy. He's going to blend in pretty easily. So let's keep an eye out for Brian. Rest in peace, Gabby Petito, and let's hope the investigators can get this thing put together soon and get an arrest warrant. The good thing about this arrest warrant that they were able to get for the unauthorized use of the credit card is that a little bit of the pressure is off to build the probable cause. They can take a little bit more time now on building their probable cause for the arrest warrant that they hope to get for murder. And Wyoming, by the way, does have the death penalty. If you like this episode, please click on the like button and maybe even subscribe to the Nothing But the Truth podcast. If you are a new listener, please consider picking up my book. It's called The 10 Must-Haves to Be a Great Detective. It is published on Amazon as a Kindle ebook or in paperback, and it's pretty reasonably priced, I think. So check it out. And it's not a long read. It's 10 bite-sized chapters that I think you'll enjoy. And there's a lot of things that I talk about in the book that I cover here in episodes of Nothing But the Truth. Well, thanks again for listening. We will talk to you Wednesday, the universe willing. So take care, and remember, as I always say, always put your best foot forward, but don't forget to work on your other foot. Bye, guys.